Well, I think you're live now. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining today. We're going to be talking about pay transparency, employee benefits, remuneration strategies. These are some of the most pressing topics on HR leaders' minds. So we're really excited to have Nico and Roxanne joining me today. Let me start by introducing myself, and then I'll pass to Roxanne and Nico to introduce. You can introduce yourselves as well. I'm Regina Caldas. I'm the director of Total Rewards at Remote. I've had the privilege of building total reward strategies for companies of different sizes, industries, very different global footprints. So definitely have experienced how complex it can be to create a robust total reward strategy that works across a wide range of markets. And I'm joined today by Nico and Roxanne, two experts that I'm sure will bring a lot of their experience to this conversation. And I can start with Roxanne. Can you introduce yourself, please? And then Nico as well.
Thanks, Regina. Sure. So thanks for having me. My name's Roxanne Davey. I'm Senior Counsel in the Employment Team at Taylor Westing in London. I specialise in employment law, be that litigious, advisory or transactional, but my specific focus is on advising North American businesses, often, though not exclusively in the tech sector, as they set up and then operate in the UK, and then often as they move into the rest of Europe too.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Nico Jelke. I'm a partner here at Taylor Westing in the Berlin office, so in Germany, and of course also advising all aspects of employment law. I have a particular focus on employee incentives and remuneration, and also on employee participation schemes, and of course pay transparency is very closely related to that, in order to have a broader understanding of everything, and of course bringing things together from a global standpoint. For many of our clients, it's very important to basically have a structure that, of course, compares in each individual country and not just in one. So we are always also working cross offices, Roxanne and I, to basically achieve that. So yeah, we're very happy to be here.
Amazing. Thank you both. And we'll be exploring strategies, exploring trends. We'll also leave some time towards the end to answer any questions. So feel free to drop them in the chat during the session. We'll address them at the end. And let's dive in. Roxanne, let's start with you. Why is pay transparency becoming such a hot topic recently? What is driving this shift, and particularly in the UK market?
Good question. And I think it's become such a hot topic for numerous reasons. So obviously, it's thought to help build trust, increase employee retention, help with hiring, and do all of those things, as well as the obvious, which is to obviously help close pay gaps that might exist. I think it's also of interest because there are so many approaches you can take to it. So it isn't really an all or nothing option. Subject to compliance with local laws, businesses are able to adopt it in the way that they think works best for their organisation, and depending on where they are in the world. So I think that's why it's been such a hot topic. I mean, in terms of the law, I'm aware that some states in the US now require employers to publish salary details in job adverts and things like that. In the UK, we've addressed it a bit differently. So our gender pay reporting obligations were introduced in April 2017. And specifically, they are looking at narrowing the gender pay gap. They're relatively limited in scope, so only companies with 250 or more employees have to report on their gender pay gap. They have to do it annually, and there are various figures that they need to report on. So the mean and media average hourly pay gap, the proportion of men and women in 4 pay bands based on the overall pay range, information on the gender bonus gap, and also the proportion of male and female employees who receive a bonus in any 12-month period. I mean, what it doesn't do is ask employers to compare the salaries of men and women doing like work or similar roles. So it's a fairly crude exercise, but we are seeing lots of businesses who are confident that they don't pay men and women differently for like work, take that extra step of their own accord, even though the law doesn't ask them to, and publish their data for either specific roles or skill levels so that they can demonstrate that people doing similar jobs ultimately aren't being paid any differently. There's no real enforcement provisions, but it seems to be working slowly. So our pay gap among full-time employees, I mean, it increased slightly in the last year, 7.7% up from 7.6, but generally speaking, it's down. I think it was something like 9% before the pandemic. So it's going the right way. We've also got plans to take it further. So as many of you know, we've just had a new Labour government elected in the UK, and they want to expand it. So they also want to make it law for larger companies to publish information on their ethnicity and disability pay gaps as well. So it's constantly evolving, and I think we'll see quite a lot of change in this space over the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nico, what about you? Do you experience similar trends in Germany and rest of Europe?
Yeah, we actually do. So, I mean, funny thing is, in 2017, the German Act was introduced as well. So it's based on the same EU regulation back then. So we also have kind of the same issue. So it is a spotted issue that needs to be solved, and there is an act out there which basically should help, but it doesn't really help. It's more a blunt sword, because there are no real consequences in breaching the law, aside from specific new case law that basically says that if you aren't able to prove that your pay gap that is there is justified by some reason that is convincing, then you have basically to pay the individual the same amount as the individual that they compare to, which kind of increases the pressure on employers to basically review their pay structure to see what they can do in terms of closing the pay gaps. And there is a trend that goes in the right direction, but from the legislator's perspective, it's too slowly moving. And as Roxanne already pointed out, from a statistic perspective, it doesn't seem to switch much. It's kind of maybe increasing here a year and decreasing there a year, but not really in an intense manner as it should be. So on an EU-wide level, they are now at the moment considering a new directive, which essentially means that it will be easier to enforce. There will be direct information claims. There will be sanctions also from the authorities. There will be inspection rights of the authorities. And it's good to be prepared for that, because many employers, if we talk to them, they say, okay, yeah, we have, of course, kind of a structure, kind of an idea, but we've kind of do it by a rule of thumb in the past. And if they have a works council, of course, it's more structured, or if they are bound by tariff agreements, it's also more structured. But you have a lot of companies out there who don't have that already, and who are now trying to fix this and then find themselves in a situation where it's really hard to do that exercise, actually. It should be simple, actually, but in reality, it isn't. And they are now trying to do that before the new law kicks in, which is to be estimated around next year when it really comes live. And then, of course, it needs to be transferred, and there will be local interpretations of it, as always. But it will be way stricter than the current law we are having in Germany. So it's good to be prepared and to basically start review processes now in order to fix things.
Yeah. And it's interesting, both of you referencing that the trend is showing, but it's slowly. And I think that's often because there's an important role that companies need to play in all of this. Pay transparency shouldn't be only about reporting obligations or compliance. It should be about building trust with employees and being upfront with their pay practices and educating employees on what their philosophy is and all of that. And I've also seen that when companies are more upfront with their pay practices and how employees are paid and why, it often has a positive impact in retention, engagement. Have you seen this, real examples of this in practice?
I have, yeah. I've seen some North American businesses that do it. They do it in the US, and so when they've moved across, they've wanted to do it everywhere, and it's worked quite well. It's not that common here yet. I think in the UK, details about pay and remuneration are still kept quite tightly, and there's a bit of a reluctance to publicise that. But gradually speaking, I think that's changing. And when I have seen businesses adopt a more transparent approach to it, it seems to have worked quite well.
Yeah, I would say the same for Germany. So if you look on a global scale, so companies that really act globally, have global subsidiaries, they really try to align things, of course, as best as possible, because you have also always deviating local taxation and local security, etc., which overall have a different outcome on the employer side of the cost scheme. So there is a difference just because there's a difference in tax and social security laws. But if you have global companies, they really try to close the gaps and to be transparent as best as they can, given the circumstances. If you look on the local market, I think we are not there yet. So obviously, German employers need some pressure from the legislator in order to push things forward. And they are now questioning themselves how to do it. And that's what we see on our desks quite frequently at the moment. Not just because of the new act, but also because applicants and talents are basically requesting it. So there are questions in interviews. How do we achieve that? How do we close the gender pay gap? Do you have one? Are you aware of it? What are your measures you're undertaking to close it? These are questions asked in interviews when you want to hire a candidate. And so the companies are forced, not only because of the law, but also because of the request from the talent, and to basically deal with that topic and to basically move quickly in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I've seen, we see a lot different companies approaching it differently. It's a struggle. And I think in my experience, there's a few criteria that generally lead to more success. And one of the elements is investing in the foundations. It's not only about sharing data for the sake of sharing data, but investing in the foundations, guaranteeing that you have the right structure, guaranteeing that your compensation-related decisions are unbiased, they are based on objective criteria. So for us at Remote, because we operate in more than 80 countries with all the complexities, we truly make this a priority to explain our employees our pay philosophy. That's public for all employees, even externally. We share that with other companies who really want help with this journey. We share our GeoPay system, how their compensation compares with other markets. And I truly believe that if you invest in educating and explaining how a pay band is built, how employees' compensation evolve through the range, what they can look for if they take a step up in their career, that eliminates a lot of the noise and a lot of the frustration, because everything is clearly for employees to understand, and they can make their decisions either internally or externally based on how they see themselves in that pay philosophy. So definitely, I think companies building that path, and it can be a long path depending on where they are in their journey, but definitely education is an area that I've seen being a little bit overlooked in terms of the pay transparency journey, and definitely something that companies, in my opinion, should invest. And speaking of investments, I'm also shifting gears to talk about a different topic related, in moving to employee benefits. We've all seen that employee benefits play a huge role in both engagement, retention. Nico, what are some of the emerging trends you're seeing in Germany, particularly, or rest of Europe? Are there any innovative, creative benefits catching on?
Yeah, of course, happy to share. So what we do see, and that really aligns with the question around pay transparency and equal pay and closing gender pay gaps, is to basically have ideas around certain extra benefits for employees that not just related to bonus and fixed salary, but also, for example, special parental leave arrangements in order to align different jurisdictions, because you have jurisdictions where the law is already very favorable, and then you have others where it is not. And we have seen larger organizations, particularly the global ones, who really try to treat their employees equal, and they look into different jurisdictions and see, okay, here it's structured this way. Let's copy that for the other jurisdictions. It costs money, yes, but it ensures an equal treatment. And that is something, a trend I would say we see quite frequently. Same goes for vacation claims, where it's also often different in individual jurisdictions, and employers try to approach this with a global policy or with a take as much leave as you want policy, of course, in alignment with the employer. Or also as regards employee participation, for example, because all that we have said in terms of transparency and equal treatment also applies for all those little bits and pieces, the benefits that you can grant in addition to your regular salary. And that's often forgotten by employers because they're always looking on, let's say, the fixed component, maybe the variable remuneration component, but they're not looking on the other benefits, like, as I said, parental leave benefits or participation arrangements or virtual participations, whatever you can think of. And everything relating to equal treatment and closing pay gaps is also related to those benefits. So if you do your review, if you try to fix the gaps, then of course all those things also have to be on the radar and need to be dealt with. And that's often forgotten. And of course, it adds in another layer of complexity because the new structures require some more ideas than the regular path that you have chosen for, say, a fixed salary component and how you compare amongst employee groups or how you justify different aspects of it. It's very difficult if you look, for example, on a special parental leave allowance, which you are paying just to a certain group of employees, which doesn't really make sense because there is no differentiating criteria available to justify that. And there it really comes back to the employer who wants to be innovative. Of course, they also have to think through all of those aspects in order not to create another gap which you actually want to close.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Roxanne, do you see similar trends, or are there any particularities in the UK that you've been seeing lately?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to Nico's point, I mean, the pay transparency piece, I mean, it goes to everything, doesn't it? Because I was reading an article the other day about, you know, the growing pension pay gap in the UK, because obviously if women are paid less, then their pension pot is going to be less at the end of it. So it's very much all connected. Generally speaking, in terms of benefits and UK specific trends, I mean, probably our biggest kind of off pay type benefit that people are increasingly interested in is flexible working. So we are seeing an increase in flexible working and the desire for that to be an option. So, I mean, we've already had the right to request flexible working for a long time. It existed pre-COVID, but in truth, it's probably fair to say that that was most heavily relied upon by women with childcare and responsibilities. Post-pandemic, many businesses have asked employees to come back to the office at least some of the time, but that doesn't mean flexibility ends there. You know, there are so many ways in which this flexible hybrid model works. More and more employees seem to be valuing a flexible work day, take their lunch whenever they want, manage earlier start times, later finish times around other commitments. And again, our new Labour government has made a pledge to make the workplace fairer by making flexible working the default. So that's definitely top of mind in the UK at the moment. Also, general wellbeing initiatives. We are seeing a real increase in the entire package. So not just pay, not just bonus, not just pension, but, you know, gym memberships, even some companies are introducing things like wellbeing funds. So employees are given an allowance, they can spend it on products or activities to support their mental, physical well-being throughout the year. And that's very different to the type of packages that we've seen before. But, you know, they're what are making employers stand out, and they are what the workforce is looking at in addition to the basics like pay and bonus and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good examples. And I think in my experience, I've definitely seen how different cultural nuances in different regions play a different part in what employees value. And I think it's definitely challenging for a global company to fit that balance between offering something that is locally relevant while at the same time providing a globally consistent experience to your workforce. And in terms of, for instance, we see in the US healthcare being critical. It's impossible to operate in the US if you don't offer a good healthcare. While in Europe, as you mentioned, Roxanne, there's a lot more emphasis now on well-being, flexible working, so other practices emerging. How do you think companies can balance these innovative benefits while remaining cost-effective in their strategies?
Maybe if I could start, I'd say it's always good to have a critical review on what your workforce actually wants in that individual jurisdiction. So from an overall approach, of course, the main component, as we all are used to it, i.e. Salary packages, bonus, whatever, shares, whatever is a regular component, is something where you need to treat everybody fairly, where there shouldn't be any gaps. And with respect to all the soft benefits, let's call it that way, like gym memberships, whatever you can think of, it really depends on the region and the view of your workforce on those benefits. Because we have seen clients who are implementing those because it is kind of requested, it's kind of part of every discussion with every applicant in a job interview. And we have seen clients where they say, yeah, it's basically we have it, but it doesn't count as a benefit. It's nice to be there, but it doesn't count, and it isn't something that convinces our individual workforce to work for us. And I find that very fascinating, because one would think, again, everything that comes extra is a good thing, but that's not necessarily the case. So it's very important to basically review what you are doing and if you are attracting the people you want to attract for your company. And I think where it really comes together is that everybody wants, of course, a fair payment and an equal treatment. And then it differentiates amongst the companies what kind of extra benefits really serve their purpose. Because ultimately you want to pay your workforce, of course, in an appropriate manner, but it also needs to be cost effective. So you need to achieve what you want to achieve with your benefit. And if the benefit is not really recognized because no one understands how it's working, I'm just talking about my specific topic of employee participation. So we've seen cases where it's simply not really requested because no one understands how it works. And then you have cases where it is requested, particularly in the startup economy, where everybody is wanting you to have something like that. And you, of course, have to offer it because it's requested. And here really it differentiates. And that applies for all the other benefits as well. So it needs to be well thought through before you implement that. From a cost perspective, but particularly also do I attract the workforce I want to attract with that, and then of course do the right thing and for your company. So I think it's very, very different from company to company.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's so important to think about what your workforce in your jurisdiction are looking for, because there's no point spending lots of money on a benefit that won't be received in the way you want it to be. Regina, what are some emerging trends that you've seen in global benefits programs or remote?
Definitely, this is the biggest challenge, and in all conversations I have with HR leaders that are they're expanding for other countries, the benefits topic is a key one. One of the emerging trends that I've been seeing more and more is companies investing in mental well-being, mental health. And this is, and as an example, this is a benefit that our employees really appreciate. We offer mental health support, including therapy sessions, counseling, all of that to all our jurisdictions. But we do it in a way that is locally relevant, because employees can choose a therapist that speaks their native language. They don't need to use English. English is of course, language for business, but they can have that localized therapist supporting them. So it definitely has been, and I think it's increasing more and more, especially with the pandemic and all the everything that's happening globally. Definitely a trend. And then another trend that I'm seeing more in European markets, and it has been common in the US, but definitely if we go back 5-10 years ago, equity-based compensation was not that common in Europe. And we're seeing more and more startups emerging in Europe, and that being a more common type of offering. And as I think, Nico, you're talking a little bit earlier about candidates asking, what's your pay transparency? What do you share? What is your philosophy around that? We also see a lot of candidates now asking, okay, but do you offer stock options? Do you have equity-based compensation? So definitely that's a trend. And it doesn't make the topic easy because it's not straightforward. It's very complex, but definitely something that I've seen more and more candidates asking about. And I think we can dive a little bit more on equity-based compensation as well. It's a hot topic, I'm sure, for you as well.
Insights from a German viewpoint. So, as you say, it really is more and more requested by talent if you want to basically approach a new employer. And the reason is rather simple. I mean, startup industry started with that, and now grown-up companies are basically competing with startup companies around talent and how they can acquire talent. That's the reason why it's on the agenda of more grown-up companies as well. And of course, you have those old schemes that did work in the past, but did provide little profit and were not that attractive to employees. And then you have virtual ones that the startups are offering quite frequently because they're easy to maintain and because everything is just contractually arranged, so there's no corporate side of things. And they're easy to maintain, but that's not something you can apply as a regular company where you're not aiming to sell all the shares to an acquirer at some point. So the exit event is not there. It's not on the horizon. It's not part of your plans. In contrast to a startup company, so you need to think through something different. And luckily, the German legislator has now changed some of the tax laws in Germany to make basically employee participation more attractive, because with some magic tricks, you can basically buy in actual equity, and usually you would have to face the so-called dry income taxation if you buy in for a lower price than the fair market value of the relevant share. And that is kind of now frozen in until that point in time when you sell it, which is a big plus from a German viewpoint. It doesn't apply for all employers, so you need to fulfill some criteria. So you need to be a small, medium-sized company. But if you fulfill those criteria, and they have been increased last year, so we are very happy that this did happen because it offers more flexibility for many German employers. And now you can basically draw up something which is fine, because usually as a regular company without the aim of being sold, it was very difficult to implement things that are also tax attractive for employees. Now you can offer that benefit to new talent and structure it so that it still fits and doesn't trigger any negative taxation issues. It's basically working through. And then, of course, even let's say if you sell it 10 years time, then the upside is subject to capital gains tax, which is half of what you have to pay as an employee usually. So it becomes more and more attractive. And that's also the reason why it's more and more requested by employees. And as you rightly say, it's not that easy to implement and also not that easy to maintain. If you're in the game, of course, then you know how it works. But if a company that starts anew, of course, it's a difficult topic. But I would say now that we have more clarity on the tax side of things, it becomes easier to structure, and it's easier for employers to basically also implement that and, of course, offer it to the talent to attract the talent. That was something we couldn't simply do outside of venture capital companies, i.e. Startups, in the past. And now that offering is also available for a huge number of German companies. That's a good thing. So I see that this really is and becomes a more hot topic in Germany, at least. Because for us, it's kind of new. In the UK, I know they already had a very favorable tax treatment, so we are always late to the party as usual. But at least we are at the party now. So for German employers, it really becomes a big topic for the future, I'd say.
And I would say not only implementing it, maintaining it, but also communicating it.
Yeah, true.
Oftentimes, we also see candidates asking for it, but not fully understanding. And for companies that are trying to use this as a retention tool that can be very effective, as we all know, it's also not easy to communicate this and to get all the population to understand the value. Have you seen companies struggling with communication and getting employees to understand
that's a very big topic, actually. It's a very big topic because, I mean, for us lawyers, having 20 pages of documents is always a nice thing to do, to see. And for us, it's kind of a hobby. Not always, Roxanne, I know. But I mean, for every employee, and I would say it's the most crucial point of it. Because as we talked about it earlier, if you have a benefit nobody understands, then it can't have any value, because then for me it could just be flying something around on my desk. I don't know what it actually means, and I'm again focusing on my regular fixed salary, for example, or my bonus, and wouldn't be convinced by what I was offered because I don't understand it. And that, I think, is the most important aspect, and it also comes down to lawyers and, of course, in the company, the GCs who design such programs, that they always need to be understandable, easy to grab, and you communicate about it when you do the all hands, when introducing such a program. It really needs to be easy to grab, easy to understand, easy to handle, also from an employee's perspective. Of course, you need that kind of 20-page of lawyers' text written, but still it can be done in a way that it's still easy to grab and understandable. And only then you have a benefit that really attracts the talent. That's a very, very crucial topic. The funny thing is, we introduced that a couple of days ago for a company, a medium-sized company, very well known in Germany, and they had actually a communication advisor just for introducing the program, to do it rightly, and so that everybody did understand what we're actually talking about. And the funny thing was that we were introducing this program while the company had a works council. And in Germany, they have co-determination rights if you do that. So they were on board as well, which tripled the effort needed to basically get it online, and also tripled the effort in communication. But ultimately it was a very good thing, because we had an all-hands meeting with everybody, and everybody was very fine that we did that, and was surprised how easy it can at least be communicated, although it was a lot of paperwork left and right. So I'd say communication is absolutely key on that end, and for that specific benefit. I mean, it translates to many benefits, not only to employee participation, because if they're too complex, then it's really hard to understand. It starts with bonus arrangements. If you have 3 pages of criteria to be fulfilled, nobody will really care, and would basically rule it out from their thinking that they actually receive something. And then it's kind of, even if you pay, it's basically, yeah, nice, but I still don't know why, and I'm not calculating with it in the next years. And that's, of course, something for the employers where there's a struggle between the law and how can we still have it in a way that everybody understands what we are actually doing for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think there's value, isn't there, in taking the time to explain things to employees, as opposed to just giving them the pack. You know, it's very easy, I think, isn't it, to just send them the pack and you read this and understand it. But I think there's real value in making sure that your incentives teams take the time to explain exactly what it means and what it could mean for individual employees.
Yeah. And it's interesting because transparency also plays an important role here. I've experienced in the past, because in global companies present in so many countries, people talk with each other. And we know that each country has, so there are, of course, some similarities in some countries, but fundamentally between others, it's dramatically different. So I've seen that in practice, where employees from this market that are colleagues with others in different markets, they talk with each other, they talk about retention, tax, and how it applies, it doesn't apply. And you really need to explain how different it is, and getting the right balance between simplifying complex topics like vesting schedules, strike prices, buying for a lower price, selling at a higher price, how that works, all that complexity, while at the same time not undermining the importance of tax and the regulations and the risks, ultimately, to get employees to fully understand and make their decisions. I think definitely it's a good thing that it's a more common topic now, but definitely I've seen a lot of contexts where employees don't understand it, they don't know what to do with that benefit, and then ultimately it's not a positive experience.
Yeah, that's true. And given the effort you need to basically create something like that, it's worth investing the money also for the communication side of things, to actually make everybody understand what we're dealing about, and what the intention is, how it works. Gives them some confidence as regards, for example, taxation, very important topic for each individual, so that they really grab what are the risks, what are the opportunities. Do I put my own money at risk, or is it basically just a benefit and nothing else? That's also very important. And not every program distinguishes that perfectly well. Sometimes, particularly the US ones, are very broad, so you have many possibilities of individual benefits. The award can be a regular stock option down to something that's just purely contractually based. And that, particularly for international teams, is difficult, because if you look from a German viewpoint, where there are multiple mechanics that wouldn't work or didn't exist in Germany, then of course it's hard to understand what kind of benefit you're actually getting. And here, communication is absolutely key, because they are drafted under the laws of a different jurisdiction, but you are still using it globally. And then, of course, it's even more important that, for example, the UK or German employees still understand what it's all about and what this specific benefit is and how it is treated and what it actually means, also risk-wise, tax-wise, etc. And I find in reality that that's one of the biggest challenges employers have. They have a very good benefit, they know, but they have to basically educate their staff that they also know, and that's very difficult topic.
Absolutely. Well, I think we covered a lot already, and I did promise we would leave some space for questions towards the end. So if you have any questions about the topics that have been discussed, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll also check if we already have questions that came while we were talking. Okay, while everyone is dropping their questions, I'll get started. So Nico or Roxanne, if one of you can share, if there's one action businesses can take this year immediately to improve their global compensation strategy, their path to pay transparency, what is that one thing that you would recommend to companies? Maybe I can start with Roxanne and then
Sure.
Nico.
I mean, to improve the global comp strategy, I mean, if it's not too basic, survey their employees if they're not already, to see, you know, if they're happy with what they've got, if they're looking for other things, and to just see how what they've got currently is landing. I think it can't really be underestimated staying in communication with your employees and seeing what they want. That's who you're trying to please at the end of the day.
Yeah,
and they're in the market of other candidates that you're trying to attract.
Yeah, true. Maybe to add that, if you have a larger company or a group of companies and you want to achieve that, I think knowing what all of your affiliated companies are currently doing and how the strategy was in the past is key to improve. Because what we do see is that many don't have that overview. One would think that it's available easily by a press of a button, but it isn't, because you don't understand how the justification was made between individual groups of employees, how it is structured, how it was structured in the past. Was it kind of just negotiating, or was there kind of a strategy in the background? And if you start new, let's say as a global HR manager, for example, you will face the simple issue that it isn't clear how the remuneration was structured in the past. And you may have a company that is governed by tariff agreements where it is more easy to find that path. But if that is not applicable for your company, then of course it's different to see how were the bands structured in the past, what was the reasoning behind it, etc. And if you want to start, I think that's the point where everything should start at the very beginning, to see, okay, where are the gaps? Are they justified? Is there really a difference? Or don't we find anything? Then of course we need to close that very quickly. And not only because it's imminent that we have to change things, but also because from a legal perspective, employees could have claims, particularly in Germany, for higher remuneration. And one court decision comes into play here that came out last year, where the Federal Labor Court basically argued that a differentiating factor between men and women to justify a pay gap is not that you have simply negotiated better. And that was the argument that was always used in Germany in the past, saying, okay, yeah, but this person, either way, negotiated better, and that's the reason why his or her salary is higher. That itself is not sufficient if you can prove that there is a gap and the duties and obligations are the same. And I think that is really, really a big issue.
Yeah, and if I can share one additional thought, depending on where your compensation strategy is and how you're building that, a good rule of thumb as you're going through determining how you make decisions, and it's asking yourself, if this was in the public journal for everyone to see, would I be comfortable with this?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then move with it. This is a question that we use a lot with managers and hiring leaders and hiring managers when getting them to reflect on decision making. But I think it also applies when companies are building their strategies and decision making, and how salary increases are given and how salaries are offered for new hires. So asking that generally helps to thumbs up, thumbs down in terms of your path forward. We have another question in the chat. Are there any tools out there where multinational companies who have branches in Europe could make a quick check if the remuneration would be in line with the European directive?
Yeah, I said so. So there are tools online you can use. We also have a sort of tool in the development where you can do that. But the main topic here again is data, because you need an overview about all of your individual pay bands, because otherwise it wouldn't work. So you need to understand what are the pay groups at the moment in each individual country, or at least have some kind of a functioning org chart where you can do that exercise, so that you have basically a salary linked to a position and a scope of duties, because otherwise you can't really do that. But I think originally what we already said, if you want to have an overview, just being risk averse, knowing, okay, do we have an issue there, or do we have the usual minor gaps that are in every company? Where of course also the solution is needed, but it may not be that pressing. I think the test you just described is the best you can do. So if you have comparable positions, like same title, same role profile, and you find yourself in a situation where for some reason the male or the women do receive a higher salary package, an overall salary package, or are receiving certain benefits that others are not receiving, then it's very likely that you have an issue, because justification is very, very difficult in such scenarios, next to impossible. We will have scenarios where there is a justification, and then it's okay by the law, maybe not okay from a political perspective, but maybe okay from the law. But I think if you spot that, then action is needed, because once the new directive is online, there will be punishments by the government as well. At least the possibility will be there. And the reality of it, with all fines and sanctions, is assume an individual, let's say, employment dispute around dismissal, for example, and someone brings that up. I had a gender pay gap, or a pay gap that needs to be closed because I was not correctly remunerated. Then you have a kind of an official discussion at an open to the public court hearing. You don't want to discuss that because it kind of translates to all of your other employees. It's not just that case. It's kind of a fire spreading. And then it may be too late. So it's definitely important to do the homework now to see, do we have an issue? What can we do to immediately fix that? Of course, not everything will work that quickly, but at least you can go into the initiative and solve things that you have spotted down the road. I think that really is important now.
Thank you, Nico. And we have a follow-up question to that. Same participant. I think you also get access to the questions. How much pay gap is okay? I think that there's no.
The pay gap needs to be justified. That's I think the most important aspect. So you need to have a reasoning for it, and that can be that the other role has, let's say, 1 or 2 bullets more in the role description, or has 1 or 2 more dotted lines to individual employees that are working towards that position, or you have more supervisors, etc. So there must be a difference between the scope of work of the two positions, because otherwise you can't just justify it. And as I said, just having better negotiated doesn't count anymore. That was the best argument in the past, but now it doesn't work. So if one finds himself in a situation where that is actually the case, two identical positions, it must be the same employer, basically. So in a group setting, that is difficult because the transparency and also the claims are always related to the individual employer. So you only compare on that basis. So that legal entity that you are employed with is the one you need to compare your other fellow employees to. So they must be in the same company. That's particularly difficult in group scenarios. And for the groups, on the other hand, as well, it's difficult because here again, it may be that you want to differentiate amongst different subsidiaries, for example. But if you follow a more global approach and want to treat everybody equal, you find yourself in a situation where there is a lot of difference between individual companies, and they are in line with the law if you just have a look on them, which you have to do from a legal perspective. But if you take a more holistic approach and want to really enforce equal payment and equal treatment on that, then of course it will be even more a struggle for global companies to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's all on top of, if I can add my HR view as well, I think oftentimes if you have a good justification, you will be comfortable sharing it. Are you comfortable sharing that with the employees, explaining we have these two situations, these two employees, this person is paid more because of XYZ? Is that something that is comfortable to explain to employees? If the answer is yes, most likely it's something that that aligns with your pay philosophy and that can have some legal, I would say, reasoning, or that can resonate with the legislation. Oftentimes is when the arguments are not that straightforward and people say, okay, I would not feel comfortable going to two employees and saying that's the reason, then there's probably something wrong there.
True, yeah.
Agreed.
When it comes to justification, I think also one important topic is that superiors are often not aware, even if they have made some sorts when making the decision. If they ask them 3 years later, it's impossible to basically recall that. And if it's a dispute in court, to basically provide any kind of evidence. So here again, if there are good justification reasons, then of course you need to kind of write them down and then store it away. And in order, if it ever comes up, then of course you have them at hand, because what we see in practice quite often is, even if there's a good justification, and there are cases where there is a justification, that no one really can recall. And then of course you can simply ask, was it this or was it this reason? But it is then very difficult for the employer side, even if they in the past did have a good reason, to actually prove that in court. So here again, it is very important to do that. To do that thinking and when making the decision, is it justified? Would I share this if I would be really open on things? And if the answer is yes, then don't stop there. Write it down so that you have it at hand if it ever becomes an issue in the future.
And to your point, Nico, I think regular audits are the way to go as well, because if someone's made a decision 5 years ago, they've gone. You get a new hire, someone else is thinking about how their pay scale should be set out, and they've made a completely different decision. And then, if you're auditing it regularly, you should pick these things up, because also if there has been a discrepancy, that doesn't need to persist. There's nothing to stop you clarifying and rectifying that as and when you come across audits to limit your backward-looking exposure to claims. So I think that's also an important point as well, that, just because it exists, just because something might have happened in the past, it doesn't need to mean it stays that way. And if you audit, you should be able to pick those things up.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious we're close to our time limit. So I wanted to thank everyone for joining today. I had a lot of fun talking about serious topics, but it was a pleasure to discuss them with Nico and Roxanne. If you want to learn more about remote and how we can help your organization navigate the global compensation challenges, visit our website, remote.com. And a reminder that Taylor Wessing clients, we offer discount. So feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for organization, Nico, Roxanne, Taylor Wessing. It was a pleasure. Thanks again. Before I close, any last thoughts, Nico or Roxanne, you want to share?
Yeah, we're of course very happy to be here and to do that together with remote. And yeah, I think approaching those challenges as regards gender pay gaps, transparency, etc., is a very hot topic. It will stay a hot topic for the next years, I think. And everybody's of course invited to do as much as they can in this regard. And of course, we're all happy to help from a legal side of things, remote from a HR practical side of things. I think the most important aspect is to do something around it, because as we've seen in the past, it wasn't so much on the radar, but it should be. So it's good that there is development, but from a legal side of things, of course, it needs to be structured, it needs to be done in a correct way, and you need to be aware of potential issues you had in the past, not knowing that you actually have them.
Yeah. And if anyone has any questions that they didn't want to put in the chat, then by all means drop us a line afterwards and we'll be happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.